Good afternoon. It's autumn and we're at the garden centre, Holmeforgardens, and it's time to plant bulbs. We're going to be planting bulbs this afternoon in grass and in borders and in pots. And the first thing we need to do is go and choose some bulbs, and so that's what we're going to do. So when you first arrive at the bulb selection, it's a lovely choice, but it can be a little bit confusing as to know what you're going to do with the bulbs and how tall they're going to get, what colour they are and what month they're going to flower in. Handy thing is, written on every packet is a lovely picture label of what it's going to be. It tells you how many bulbs there are in the pack. It tells you when it's going to flower. It's going to flower in March and April, this particular one, and it's going to get to 45 centimetres, so it's 18 inches tall, which is about knee high. So you've got all the information there you need to make your decisions on. And the reason we're going to use that now is because when we go out into the borders, I wouldn't choose this one to go in a border personally, because once these are flowered, you're going to get a lot of foliage left over, and by the time they finish flowering in April time, all your herbaceous is going to be pushing up in the borders, and it's going to collapse over the up and coming herbaceous. So what we're going to do is you could use these taller ones into grassland and into your lawn and areas that you can leave for 6 weeks after they've flowered, and then then they'll die back naturally, and then we can cut it back to lawn again afterwards. So I'm going to use taller ones in the longer grass, and then I'm going to use little short ones, 6 inches ones in the borders, give a nice little burst of early colour, and then herbaceous will come through, and then we're off into summer. So there are 3 major bulbs and then a whole lot of other ones as well. So you're probably familiar with crocus, you're probably familiar with daffodils and narcissi, and you're probably also familiar with tulips, which is this section down through here. And within that you can make your selections quite easily. So that's a whole thing of tulips, and lots of different colours, different flowering times, different flowering heights. So that's a good choice. But if you come this way, we've got more specialist bulbs. So here are some of the less common bulbs that you might want to choose and look at. Alliums have become very popular over the last few years. These are ornamental onions, and at this time of year, buying them as dried bulbs is a lot cheaper than buying them in the springtime in pots, where you'll pay as much for one bulb as you'll pay for the whole pack of these at this time of year. And in here are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bulbs, so they're 6 times cheaper at this time of year. So get them in now, particularly if you're going to be putting a quantity of them in. So that's alliums, and then we've got other specialist bulbs here from different areas. So these are camasias, which come from America, and they are quite good in wet ground, as are native snake's head fritillary. These are white ones, but they come in other colours as well. Then we've got woodland bulbs. These are erythroniums, which are dog's tooth violets, dog's tooth lilies, and also anemone blanders. They'll grow very well in woodland situation as well. Leucogium, which is the giant snowdrop. They're good in woods. And then we've got other plants that have evolved for open mountainside situations, where there's a open soil where the roots can get down quite deep, and then they get snow melt water, and they'll come up and do their stuff with the snow melt water, and then it'll go really hot and dry for the summertime, and then they'll dive back down for cover at that point to see the summer out. But they're very good in dry situations, so we tend to plant them in this country in dry bowl displays, or in alpine gardens, or you can put them just on a free draining bank in a sunny situation. So it's mimicking what they have in their native situation, and those would include these things like Chionodoxa here, or these Iris reticulatas, which are only little short ones like that, but they flower nice and early in the season in February, so they give you a nice little bit of burst of colour in the early part of the season. So whole choice of other things that are not tulips, daffodils and crocus, which are the common ones that people know. What we'll talk about now just is difference between naturalising and growing in pots. So most bulbs you can grow in pots, but if you want a bulb that's good for naturalising, it's got to then be truly perennial, so it's going to go on for years and years and years. And most snowdrops snowdrops are good for that, sorry. Crocus are very good for that. Daffodils are very good for that. Most tulips are not very good for going on for years. So if you're looking to put a plant, put them in and then leave them and they're going to give you a display for years and years, the hybrid tulips are not the ones to choose. Some of the species ones are okay. Today we're going to be looking at planting in both grassland pots and in borders as well. So the ones we're going to put in borders and grass need to be naturalizing varieties, and the ones that we're going to be putting in pots can be basically anything. So I've got an area of grass that I want to plant bulbs into. Now if you're just planting a few, then these packets will suffice. So we've got 7 in that pack, which will give you a nice little clump in the grass, or you can spread them out over a small area. However, if you need bigger quantities, because you're going to be doing several hundred or several tens of, then it's much cheaper to buy them loose like that, where you've got lots of bulbs for the same price, for a lesser price. So that's a more economic way of doing it. So this is one of our meadows out in the gardens, and we've just taken it down from its long height, summer height, and we've just taken it down to its autumn height. We've taken the arisings away from that, which is going to take a lot of the nutrient out of the meadow. So next year, hopefully, with a little bit less nutrient in there, it'll grow a little bit shorter, and that will give the wildflowers a bit more chance to come through. Anyway, it's the opportunity now is to actually get some bulbs in here, and because they're going to be growing in a meadow, they're going to come up early before the grass, do their flowering, and then the grass is going to grow up around them, and it will support the foliage and it will hide the foliage of the bulb as it dies back, and then the meadow is going to come into flower, and you won't even see the bulbs that have been already flowered, and as you won't see them as they're dying back. So I've chosen here a 14-inch daffodil called Bittern, and we're going to plant them in here. So I like to keep them, well, there's 2 ways of doing it. You can either broadcast them out over the area that you're going to do and just plant them sort of naturally, one here, one there, but it does look a bit sparse and thin. So it's good to have areas where they're concentrated in higher concentrations, and then areas where there's none at all. So it just looks more natural and a little bit more random. But I'm just going to scatter them out here. So then I'm going to mimic that by just making the holes in this area randomly, and then we're going to put the bulbs in, and they'll end up with our random nature. So this is our bulb planter that we looked up in the garden centre. So I'm just going to get it into the area there. I'm going to push it into the ground and then just wiggle it, and I'm going to take it out. Now you'll notice that the sod doesn't come up with it, and don't try and get it out because you don't need to, because the next time you push it in, it should push the original one up and our second one comes out, and by the time you get to the third one, they're all popping out and you can use and put in. So now what we're going to do, you see the holes we've got here, roots down, pointy end up, and I'm actually going to put 2 in this hole, and then you can put 1 in the next hole, 2, 3 in the other, and that will give you your randomness that you're looking for. And then simply all you're going to do is do that, put your sods back over the top of them, and then we're just going to tread them in like that. So the alternative way, that was using the bulb planter. I don't like to have too many tools. I like to have tools that have got multi-use. I'm actually going to use a spade in this instance to show you the other way of doing it. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to give it a good kick, knock the spade down in there, and I'm going to go about two-thirds the way down, and I'm going to bend it back, and you see the turf lifting in front of it. And then I'm just going to push the spade in a little bit further, and then as I push forward, you'll see it's now opened up a hole behind it, and I can drop 2 bulbs in behind the spade, and then I can simply just take the spade out and you wouldn't even know we've been there. Just tread that down. Now, so that one went that angle there. So now if I do the next one at a different angle, you'll get a random pattern developing. So putting 2 in at a time, go in 2/3 to 3/4, push in a little bit further and then lift forward, and that will open up the hole behind. One bulb, 2 bulbs. Look at them in the hole, pointy end upwards, and then just going to withdraw the spade and knock that down. And that's how to plant into grass. And it's a great time, as we've been discussing, to choose your bulbs, but it might not be time to plant them out, because I want to get some bulbs into this area where the cosmos is growing, but the cosmos is still flowering away nicely. So what I've done is I've chosen the bulbs that I want to go into this spot, but I'm not going to plant them here for another month or so, until after the cosmos is finished. And when we don't like the look of the cosmos anymore, we're going to take that out, and then that's the opportunity to get the bulbs in. So what we're going to do is, I have got an area that's all ready for planting now, and we're going to look at that over there. However, what I would just say is you get maximum choice in September. So going September and early October, get in there, choose your bulbs, even if you're not ready to plant them or your borders aren't ready to receive them. Get your bulbs now, and then you can plant them anytime up till about Christmas time. Don't leave it after Christmas, but really you want to sort of November, early December, but you can go up to Christmas. Okay, so here's a part of the border, although it's still September, it's ready. The bedding plants have already been removed here that were in here during the summertime, and we're ready to put that into the border. So we've chosen out some tete-a-tete narcissi bulbs here, which I've got ready to go in. We've got a layer of mulch on the surface there, which is bark. So I'm just going to get that loose stuff off and away to the side, and we'll put that back on again afterwards when we've finished. Oh, that smells good. Nice and earthy. Right, so here's our bulb planter, and you'll see depth-wise, twice the depth. That is about half the height there. So what I'm going to do is actually go down full depth with this, and then drop that in the bottom of the hole, and then we'll replace the hole over the soil over the top. So you can pre-space them, or you have to remember where they're going to go. So what I'm going to do is just pre-space them. I like daffodils in tight groups, narcissi in the borders. I like them to look like a clump of herbaceous, really. I don't like them just odd individual ones just spread out. So I'm gonna, what have I got? 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 in that group there. And what we're going to do is we're going to plant that one there, twist it in, get that down to depth there, and then I'm going to take that out, and it's taking the core of soil, as you can see, is still in there. And then we're going to put the bulb in the bottom, and then we press the lever at the end, and that will release the lump back over the top, and then we just press it down again. So just repeat that process until we've got all the bulbs in. Lift it up, bulb in the hole, press the lever, drop it out, go on, move on to the next one. Make sure it's pointy end up, roots down. Pointy end up, roots down. So that's using that machine contraption there, but you can also use, that's the bulb planter there, or you can use a trowel. So the other way to do it is just lift it, ease it up, a bit like we were doing with the planting in the field. Make a hole behind it, drop that to the bottom of the hole, and then let the soil go. So that's our group of bulbs back in. Firm the ground down. You don't need to water. They'll be dormant in the soil at this time of year anyway, and they'll be just existing. When the soil moisture levels get to the right, to the levels that they're happy with, they'll start to grow anyway, and you won't need to do anything. You'll see some people using fertilizer. You'll see some people using mycorrhiza. The bulbs don't need that. Particularly in here, we've already got mycorrhiza living in this very healthy here. You can see this white stuff on the bark. is mycorrhizal fungi already feeding off the bark mulch on the surface, and they'll be taking that back down. So this is all enriched with mycorrhiza. You don't need to put it in. And even in grassland, I've never had a failure without using mycorrhiza of bulbs in the ground. I will use mycorrhiza for trees and shrubs, absolutely, every time, but I won't use it for, not necessarily on the bulbs. And so last thing to do, oh look, here we go, look at that. Tell you who else is happy in here is our little worm. Okay, because we're putting lots of organic matter onto the surface, you've got a happy worm. He's just gone into stasis at the moment. He's starting to move again now. Happy, happy, happy. So I'll just make sure I don't squash him. Put that there. Put him back down. Put a little bit of moist stuff over the top, lightly over the top of him, and away we go. Job done. Some violas there, which will flower right the way through the winter and into next summer. And I've chosen a cyclamen, which gives us lots of good colour, at least up until Christmas. And if the weather stays quite warm, that'll go right through to the spring. And a juga, will give us leaf colour throughout through the winter as well. And then what we're going to do is we're going to underplant bulbs to come up through that display in the pot. That's nice colour tones, isn't it? Yeah, I like that. Now, you can use bulb fibre to plant your bulbs in, which is perfectly fine, and the bulbs will grow well in that. But I'm going to use John Innes number 2 for a couple of reasons. Firstly, if you look at the volume there, you get a lot more value for buying a bigger bag than the smaller bags. And John Innes number 2 is basically formulated like a soil would be formulated. So it is, because of the mineral element in there, the sand particles, it's going to not break down for years to come. So you can actually put in the pot, and then in the springtime we can keep the same compost in there and then just refresh it and add a bit of extra fertilizer, and that will go through the summer as well, and we won't have to get rid of it and change it over. So I'm going to use John Innes number 2 because it's a long-term potting and it will last the plant and the pot for years and years. So we've picked everything we wanted to create this pot display, winter pot display from the garden centre. So we've got our plants, we've got our bulbs, we've got our compost, we've got the pot itself, and we've got a bit of drainage material at the back here. So first thing to do when you before you actually buy the pot, but is to make sure it has got a hole in the bottom. See my little finger pointing through the bottom there. So that's it has got a drainage hole, because the compost needs to drain. Bulbs don't like being sitting in. Most bulbs don't like sitting in water. They'll just rot off. So what we're going to do is to stop that hole bunging up, I'm just going to place a stone with an indent over near the top of it. I don't want to block it. So I'm just choosing a couple of stones here that have got indents in them to go around, and what they'll do is they'll keep that hole open, and then I'm going to gently pour some drainage gravel over the top of it. So now if you look in there, you'll see that there's plenty of free draining gravel around the hole, and then we can start putting our compost in. Okay, so we've got our stones in the for drainage in the bottom of the pot. I'm just going to move it nice and close to me. If you holding things at a distance, it puts so much more pressure on your back. So if you bring stuff closer into you, it's less strain. So we're going to first open up the compost. I've got a nice sharp knife here, just opening up the bag. So this is our John Innes number 2 compost, which is exactly the same as John Innes number 3, except John Innes number 3 has got more fertilizer. And the reason I'm not using John Innes number 3 is because this is a winter pot, and they're not going to be doing a lot of growing They won't need the food until after they finish flowering in the spring. So I'm going to keep a low nutrient or medium low nutrient compost, which is the John Innes 2, and then we can add some fertilizer in the new year when after they flowered in about February, March, April time, and then that'll feed up the bulbs for the following season. And we're using John Innes because it's you can see here it's got a lot of soil in it, and it doesn't look too dissimilar to your garden soil there. So soil, it's then augmented with some sand and some organic compost to beef it up a bit. So because it's got the mineral elements in there, it's not going to break down over time, so it's a great compost to use for years and years, and that's why I like using it in the pots, because you don't have to swap the compost over. You can just add more fertilizer as and when required. Right, so I'm going to put the compost in on top of the stones. So I'm just breaking up any large bits of any large lumps there, but then it's very loose, and if we don't consolidate it, then it is going to sink a lot over the next few months. So I'm just consolidating. I'm just putting a little bit of weight through my fingers there, just to get it down and well into the corners. And I'm going to get it to within about 6 inches of the top, 4 to 6 inches from the top. And then we're going to put our first layer of bulbs in, which will be the bigger tulips. And then we're going to put daffodils over the top of that. Then we're going to plant our plants. And finally, we're going to fill in with a few crocus in the gaps, which we'll put in with our fingers. So there we are, about 4 to 6 inches. Let's just consolidate that layer as well. So next, we're now going to position our larger bulbs, which are this variety of tulip here. And you can see we've got 7 bulbs there. I'm just going to evenly space them around the pot. So pointy end is the bit that's going to grow. Roots are going to come out of the bottom, the blunter end at the bottom there. Okay, so it's blunt end down. Funnily enough, they will actually, if you make a mistake, they will actually turn over, but it doesn't help them with their energy levels. They have to use a bit more of the bulb's resource turning around again. So it's better that you put them the right way up to start with. That's our first layer of bulbs. Then we're going to just cover those very slightly with compost. You can see them disappearing, just see the noses of the bulbs there. And then we're going to use our next biggest bulbs, which are the pink tulips there. And we're going to do the same again, just push them into the gaps between the other ones. Isn't this fun? Great thing is, you're going to do this work and then you're not going to see anything of the bulbs for a few months, and you'll forget that you've put them in, and then you're going to have this lovely surprise in February, March and April next year as they all start popping through. So that's 2 I was planted, and I'm also going to put the daffodils in at the same time here, and these are going to flower slightly earlier than the tulips. I'm just lifting them out. Even that little small one will probably produce a flower, and then next year it'll bulk up into a bigger size bulb. So the daffodils, remember we talked about earlier about bulbs, the naturalising of bulbs for planting in pots, and most bulbs will go in pots quite happily, but you do need to use plants that will, a choice of bulb that will go on for years and years if you're going to use it for naturalising out in the garden. And the daffodils are one that will go on for years and years. So even after this pot display is finished, this will go through giving a nice show right through till sort of May, June time, late May next year, by which time it will be time to switch it over into summer bedding. But at that point you can actually reuse the daffodil bulbs and you'll be able to, and the crocus bulbs, and you'll be able to plant them out in the borders or into the grass, and they'll grow quite happily as well. So we've got to that stage there. We've got some very small tulip bulbs there, and we've got some crocus to go in afterwards. So what I'm going to do now is actually I'm going to finish filling the pot to the near the top, and then we can start positioning the plants, and then we're going to plant the other bulbs through finally. So I'm going to start with the three major plants that we've got here, which is a cyclamen, a leucothe, and an ajuga, or the common name, and that is bugle. So I'm going to, because this is actually going up against the wall, I'm going to put the taller one to the back, and then I'm going to... Now, a trick with cyclamen, they are very prone to rotting off at the base there. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to plant it slightly out of the pot. So I'm going to plant it shallow, so when you water it, it dries off very quickly in this area and stops it rotting. So that's actually out of the pot altogether there. That one's a bit deeper. And the ajuga is going to go in here. Some people like to put a bit of ivy in there, which will trail down over the edge. And we're pretty much there. Just going to put a little bit more compost in through the middle of it there, and need to get something down the back of the leucothe around the edge there. So we're there, and then we're going to put the rest of our bulbs in, and then we'll just put one or two violas over the top. So in going now is our crocus. So these ones will probably flower the earliest of the lot. So I'm just going to push them lightly into the surface there. I want the eventual compost height to be about the same depth of the bulb again on top of it. Now people get very het up about what depth the bulbs are going. You want to get it roughly right, which is about twice the depth of the bulb. But if it's going into a naturalising situation, so out in the garden, the second year, as they finish flowering this year and they start to build the corm or the bulb up again for the following season, they'll actually build the bulb at the right level that they want to be in the ground. So they will right themselves over a couple of years, even if you get them in the wrong place. So remember, these were corms, so you can see they look like a bulb because there's one coming out of the centre, but actually if you look carefully there's another shoot coming off the side there. So these are corms, these crocus. And there's our tulips, and these ones were a lot smaller than the tulips we had a minute ago. So let's get them out of the thing. So that's what we're doing there. And here, as you can see, they're much smaller. So I'm just going to use my finger just to make a hole and just drop them in. So that's all the bulbs in now, and then I'm just going to finish topping up with soil, make sure they're well covered there to the depth that we wanted, and then just going to fill in the gaps with 3 violas. So if you've got a second pot, you can use them in the pot, or you can plant them out in the border, but buying bedding plants in packs is cheaper than buying them in individual pots. So I'm just making a little hole in that area with my fingers, and then I'm just going to push that down into it there. And we're pretty much there. So one final thing to do is to make sure we water this in well. But what I'm not going to do is I'm not going to water it yet. I'm going to move it into its flowering position because it's heavy. We're using a soil-based compost, which is heavy. It's a clay pot, which is heavy. So we'll keep the weight down as much as possible. We'll get it into its flowering position, and then we'll just water it in. Now, a trick, again, with the cyclamen is not to water over the top of them. Never water over the top of them. If you need to water, water to the sides. So water using a jet rather than a rose. The rose is the one that will make a fine spray or a fine stream of water. You want this one to actually just be a little a solid bit of water that's just going in through in between them. So we're trying to wet the soil around it and not get the foliage wet. Okay, and now cyclamen are absolutely brilliant where you've got them up against a dry wall. They'll do you right through the winter. Really nice and colourful. Good, there we go. So I do hope you've enjoyed watching this video and found it interesting. And if you have, please like and subscribe, and that will help more people enjoy it as well.